All right, it is 6:01 p.m. Kane and Hunter, are you good?
Yep.
Perfect. Julia and Alicia, good. You can hit
Yep.
the chat. Okay,
Yep.
awesome. And I see currently 74 participants joining us. We're at 100. So I will go ahead and open up the webinar. Awesome. Well, good Wednesday afternoon, evening. My name is Tiffany McCall. I am the Director of Communications and Media for the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority. And we are here this evening to bring you information about the adopted changes and upcoming changes related to Redefining the Ride Xpress 2.0. I see that we have participants steadily entering the chat, so I want to give everybody enough time. I know that this is virtual, but some people may be needing a little time to settle in. So we're going to take about 3 to 5 minutes to let everybody get in, and then we'll go ahead and proceed with the webinar. I'll be monitoring the chat. All right, perfect. It is now 6:07, so we will proceed with starting the webinar. Got it. Again, to those of you who have joined us, thank you for joining us for our virtual public meeting. Again, it is 6:07 p.m. and we're going to kick things off. Again, this is for Redefining the Ride, Xpress 2.0, and we'll be sharing with you information about the upcoming adopted service changes. Next slide, please. All right, a little bit about Redefining the Ride Express 2.0 for those of you who may not be familiar. In 2024, the Atlanta Region Transit Link Authority launched a regional study. The purpose of this study was to assess commuter travel patterns, evaluate existing commuter business service levels, identify potential service changes for the express bus system to better match commuter demands. In the summer of 2024, the ATL board adopted system-wide recommendations. In the winter of 2024, they refined corridor service plans. A refined corridor service plan was developed. In January of this year, January 13th to be exact, through February the 12th, we did a 30-day public notice or public comment period. As of April the 3rd, 2025, the final corridor service plan was adopted by the ATL board. This is what gave us the ability to move forward with the service changes. And a key date that I want all of you guys to write down and please keep in mind will be June 16th. This will be implementation of all service modifications. Again, jot this date down, June 16th. 2025 will be the implementation of all service modifications. Next. All right, so this evening's meeting format. I know you guys are at home. We're going to make this as seamless as possible. So I'll be your moderator and host today. Again, my name is Tiffany McCall. I'm the Director of Communications and Media for the ATL. We have our Deputy Executive Director, Mr. Kane Williamson, and we also have our Project Manager and Consultant on the project, Hunter Abel. After you'll hear from each of these individuals. We will present you a presentation on Xpress and the final service plan, along with we will host a Q&A session. A little bit about the Q&A. There is a Q&A chat button feature at the bottom of the screen. Please make sure to submit any questions there. We will do our very best to address your questions during the time allotted. However, if we don't get to your question this evening, they will be pulled from the chat and addressed most likely in our FAQs. So we will review and compile the questions in our frequently asked questions section on the Xpress website. All right, moving on. Next slide. We'll be passing things over to Kane Williamson.
Hi there. My name is Kane Williamson. As Tiffany said, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the ATL. And I appreciate you all joining us tonight. Thank you for the time to talk to you about the changes that are coming to the Express bus system. So you can see there on the screen what our intent to do today is to talk to you about the Redefine the Ride planning effort that we've been through, what the final service plan looks like. We'll give you some information about what the Express bus fare policy is and how transfers to MARTA will work. And then provide you some information about additional support for customers who find that they may need some additional support to find other ways to and from their destinations as a result of our changes, the timeline for implementation, and then we'll do, as Tiffany mentioned, the Q&A going toward the end of the webinar. So a little bit about the Redefine the Ride effort in general. Just to give you a little bit of context about Express service, I'm sure you all many of you are probably familiar with our service because you might ride it already, but the Express bus network is operated by the ATL, and it gives commuters throughout the 13 county metropolitan Atlanta region an opportunity to get to and from destinations in major employment centers currently, such as in downtown, midtown, and perimeter center. We have 27 bus routes now that serve 27 park and ride lots scattered across those 13 counties in Metro Atlanta. And then we have 55 bus stops currently in those activity centers of downtown, midtown, and perimeter center. So that's the base at which we are starting, and the changes will come from that base. So can we move a little forward? So thank you here. The motivation for this change in the system that we're talking about with you today, to give you a little bit of a history, during the pandemic, our ridership dropped to approximately 10% of what it was at the pre-pandemic level. So we were hurting for riders during the pandemic. And since the pandemic has ended, our ridership has improved, but we're still operating at roughly 30% of pre-pandemic ridership levels. But we've only trimmed our service once during the course of the pandemic, and we are currently offering more service than is being consumed. And this has not gone unnoticed by the General Assembly, the Georgia legislature. The Georgia legislature is where our local dollars come from. So every year during the legislative process, we make budget requests, and the legislature makes decisions about how the state's budget will flow, and how much money will come to our budget. And in fiscal year 25, the legislature reduced the amount of money that they're flowing to us by $4 million. Also, just to give you an idea, we use those state dollars to match against federal dollars at an 80%, 20% ratio. So a reduction of $4 million from the state means that we have a significant reduction in federal dollars available to us as well, because we can't match them. So all of this is combined basically to put us in the position of having to cut service, because there is no budget to support continued operations of the service levels at they are currently being operated. And in addition to that budget cut, the legislature directed us to develop a plan to trim service levels and to implement that plan in fiscal year 25. The state fiscal year 25 runs from July 1 of 2024 through June 30th of 2025. And so we are at the very tail end of fiscal year 25, and this is as late in the year as we can reasonably make this implementation happen and still be compliant with the direction that the Georgia legislature gave us. And so a little idea about what the service plan will do. We have gone through about 18 or 24 months of planning efforts here to adjust the service, meaning we will eliminate a fair number of routes. We'll consolidate some routes. We also have adjusted trip times and numbers of trips on each of these routes. And some of our park and ride lots will no longer serve some of them, primarily lots that we leased. And we will let go of those leases. Again, another effort to trim our costs in accordance with the direction we got from the legislature. And some of our routes will also in at MARTA stations a little further outside of the core, introducing a transfer to MARTA there too. Next slide. And so that's just sort of an introduction of why we have been required to do this effort and why we'll be moving into the implementation of the changes. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Hunter, and he's going to talk to you a little more specifically about the changes that are being that will be introduced on June 16th.
The overall final service plan that will be implemented on June 16th. And then we're going to go through corridor by corridor and look at the exact route and schedule and all of the stops in Midtown and downtown Atlanta to make sure that riders are well informed of the new service that's coming and be able to hit the ground running June 16th. So on this next slide, I know this is a lot to take in, and we're going to go through this corridor by corridor, but just want to hit on a few key notes here as we look at a system-wide level. So as Kane mentioned earlier today, Xpress operates 27 routes across 27 park and rides. As part of the final service plan, 12 routes will be discontinued and there will be 15 Xpress routes remaining across the system. From a park and ride standpoint, whereas we're currently at 27 park and rides, 9 of those will permanently close. However, Express will begin service at 3 park and rides that it does not serve today. So that ends up with a total of 21 park and rides that riders will have to access the Express system. And then whereas today Express is serving downtown, Midtown, and Perimeter Center, routes to Perimeter Center will be discontinued as noted here on the map here with the red dotted lines. So the routes coming from I-20 East and 85 North will be discontinued to Perimeter Center. And then Express is also assuming some service from the 85 North corridor to Emory, which is operated by RideWinet today. Overall, system-wide, there will be a reduction in trips ranging from about 50 to 75%, again, really depending on the corridor today. And as Kane mentioned, a lot of this is really driven by the overall passenger demand by corridor. And so, and the QR code is down here in the bottom left. We're going to walk through a lot of this tonight, but if at any moment you want to go online and check out any of these changes yourself, you can go to the Redefining the Ride website, which will have multiple times throughout the night posted on a QR code, as well as a more interactive map to see exactly where the stops and park and rides are per route. So as I mentioned, we'll walk through each corridor one by one, and we're going to start off with I-20 East and then go counterclockwise around the region and ending with I-75 South. So the general layout of the slides here is we'll have up at the top the route that will be running as of June 16th, 2025. We'll have the park and rides that will be served by that route, and then the termini that route will end at. And then in the middle here, you'll have a general map of where the route is serving, so the park and rides it's serving, and then whether it's going to downtown or midtown. And then on the right here, you'll see a map of all of the stops by route, or rather by corridor, through downtown and midtown, so you can see exactly which stops are being served and the overall circulation of the route. And then this blue box will be the primary service changes, so the major things that are changing, park and rides that may be closing or discontinued routes. So with that, I'll jump into the I-20 East corridor here. So starting June 16th, the I-20 East corridor will be served by the Route 426 with service at Panola Road and West Conyers Park and Rides. Service will be maintained to downtown and midtown via the Route 426. And then on the right here, you'll see the general stop order, both in the AM and the PM. So for example, in the morning for Route 426 from I-20 East, it will follow the interstate into downtown and then begin stopping in downtown along Ted Turner, Mitchell, Central Ave, Peachtree Center, very similar to how the downtown routing occurs today, before going into Midtown and continuing to stop at Civic Center and then along West Peachtree at North Ave Station, 10th, 14th, and so forth, up to the Art Center Station MARTA stop. In the afternoons, the route will serve both Midtown and downtown, but it will start at Civic Center and pick up through Midtown before looping back to pick up through downtown. So throughout this process, we've heard from riders that they really want to maintain their existing stops in downtown and Midtown, and there are very few stops that are being discontinued as part of this service plan. So I would encourage you to go online, check out the interactive map, and you can see just exactly where your route will be going in downtown and Midtown. And then to cover some of the primary service changes for this corridor. So routes 423 and 428 will be discontinued. Route 426 will be the primary and sole route that provides service to downtown and Midtown Atlanta. Direct service to Perimeter Center will be discontinued, as well as the East Conyers Park and Ride, which is a lease lot today, will be closed. Riders will need to use the West Conyers or Panola Park and Rides to access the Route 426. And then Buses will come every 40 minutes during the Tuesday to Thursday timeframe and a little less during Monday and Friday. So I'm going to cover the schedule here on the next slide. So um, if you visited the website already, you probably have seen this, but this is the general schedule for the Route 426. And the way you can read this is the AM inbound is on the left side here. And so the first two stops will be at the West Conyers and Panola Park and Rides. And then the next 5 stops will be in downtown and midtown. So the first trip that will be serving West Conyers would leave at 5 a.m., go to Panola Park and Ride around 5:15 a.m., and then enter downtown around 5:30, circulate through the stops down there, and then go into Midtown starting around 5:45 before ending just after Art Center. And then the last trip on the inbound AM side would start at 7:40 at the West Conyers Park and Ride, nearly 8 o'clock for the Panola Road Park and Ride before going into downtown around 8:30 and Midtown around 8:45, 9 a.m. And then on the other side here, this other half is going to be the PM or outbound service. So the service that you would take home from work or school. So the Route 426 will actually start at the Civic Center MARTA station and go north along West Peachtree. So if you remember the stop order on the previous slide, it will pick up in Midtown from about 2:50 to 3:10-ish, 3:20, and then go pick up in downtown from around 3:30 onward. And then the last trip of the day would start in Midtown at 5:30, pick up in downtown around 6 o'clock. Again, really depending on where you're catching it, give or take a minute or two if you're in between one of these stops, for example. And then getting out to the Panola and West Conyers Park and Rides later in the evening. One thing I'll also note on these schedules is that on some corridors, we'll be running a reduced Monday-Friday schedule, which means that likely 1 to 2 trips will not operate on a Monday or Friday, which is generally when Xpress's ridership is lower. Again, really based on in-person employment and other regional travel patterns. So for the Route 426, the 5 a.m., 6:20, 7 a.m., and 7:40 trips, along with the respective outbound trips in the PM, will operate Monday to Friday. However, this one trip here that's not bolded and has an asterisk here at 5:40 a.m. and then again at 3:30 p.m. will only operate on Tuesdays to Thursdays. So I'll pause here, and what I think we'll end up doing is pausing for a minute or two after each corridor. And if Tiffany, if there's any specific questions on the Route 426 or changes to I-20 East, we can address those now, and we'll always have time to come back if the questions aren't typed in yet, or you're still kind of digesting the schedule and the changes here.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you, Hunter. Attendees, at this moment, as he mentioned, we will take a pause. And if you have any route specific questions related to the I-20 East corridor schedule that he just went over, please drop them in the chat. We'll take a few minutes to make sure these are addressed, and we will be doing this after each explanation. So if you can, go ahead and drop any route specific or any corridor I-20 East corridor schedule in the chat, and I will try to get those answered.
And while you're doing that, I'll walk through this downtown circulation again. So as I mentioned in the morning, if you're looking at these on the website, you'll also be able to correspond the numbers here on the map. So that 1, 2, 3, 4 through 7 with the stops here. So really, this is referred to as like a time point schedule, in that, there's the scheduled time that the bus will reach each of these numbered stops. And then the stops in between will be roughly 1 to 2 minutes before or after, depending on where they fall.
Got you. Okay. So I do have one that should be related to the I-20 East corridor schedule. They want to know the 405 pickup 4:05 p.m. is the pickup time. Is that the pickup time or drop-off time, Hunter?
Yes.
4:05 p.m. Is this the pickup time or drop-off time?
Okay. Yeah, so the morning schedules, so that any of these AM times that you see on the left side, the pickups will be at the two park and rides. So the Express will pick up at the West Conyers and Panola park and rides, and then drop off along, in downtown and midtown. And then on the PM side, I'm not seeing a 4:05, but they may have been referring to the 4:50 time. Any of the PM, so Civic Center through the Forsyth stop are going to be pickups. So the bus is going through Midtown and downtown and picking up people that are leaving work or school and then driving out I-20 East to the park and rides. So, for example, if you're a passenger that gets on the MARTA at the Art Center MARTA station at 3:02, you'll be picked up by the Express bus at that time. And then you'll be dropped off at the Panola Park and Ride at 4:05 p.m.
Okay.
So, oh yes, I was missing the 4:05, but yeah. So that is a drop off time.
Perfect. Next question, someone asked, is it possible to change the Tuesday through Thursday express bus schedule to a Monday through Friday schedule? They said that I am a federal employee who worked remotely, but now I have been required to report to the office in downtown Atlanta.
Yeah, that's a good question. So throughout this process, we really had a goal of meeting that fiscal year 25 state legislative mandate for the budget. And this process really worked out, identifying trips to meet the overall passenger demand. And so I would say ATL will continually evaluate the passenger demand, particularly as people are returning back to the office. However, at this time, as of June 16th, the 5:40 and the 3:30 p.m. will just be a Tuesday to Thursday service. However, that doesn't preclude, down the road, if ridership increases, ATL adding that trip back in, particularly on Mondays and Fridays.
Okay. Thank you, Hunter. We have one more question related to this section. Someone wanted to know, can you please share the slide showing all stops, or is that available online?
Yes. So I think Tiffany may have mentioned this at the beginning, but we'll certainly post the video online so that you can refer back if you have questions about any of the routing that we go over tonight. However, this picture here is available on the Redefining the Ride website, and we'll have the QR code on several of the slides tonight. But definitely go online. All the information that's being shared tonight is accessible online.
Okay. We'll take two more related to this. They're still populating, but we'll take two more. The next question is, will these trips stop at Spring and Fifth? And I guess it's Spring and Fifth Street. Yeah.
Yes. So as you'll note here, the Spring and Fifth Street stops are on this side of the map right here. So that would be in the Tech Square area. So in the morning, the bus will drop off through downtown first and then drop off through Midtown before ending at Spring Street. So it'll drop off at Spring and Fifth. And then in the afternoons, it will start picking up at Civic Center, go up to Art Center, and then loop back around and again pick up at Spring and Fifth. So yes, there will be a pickup and drop off spot.
Okay. One of the next questions, someone wanted to know, will the 432 Brands Mart Park and Ride be closing?
Yes, so that is a I-75 South route. So I will get to that when we get around to that corridor.
Okay. And one last question before we proceed. Will the stops in between the major stops still be made Luke Peachtree Place and Fifth at Spring Street in Midtown?
Let's see. So I think reading between there, on the West Peachtree side, it will be the same stops as today. So it'll stop at Civic Center, North Ave MARTA Station, Fifth, Peachtree Place, which is kind of right there next to the Midtown MARTA Station, 12th, 14th, which is near the Whole Foods and some of the lawyer offices, and then Art Center Station.
Okay. All right, there have been no more questions related to I-20 East. You can proceed to the next.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the US 78 corridor. Again, kind of how this is laid out is we'll present the new service in the corridor and then talk about some changes. So the Route 419, which is providing service today in the US 78 corridor, will continue to provide service at the Hewitt Road and Snellville Park and Rides to both downtown and midtown. So this is a slight change for the 419. Today it only serves downtown, but it will follow the exact same alignment actually as the I-20 East. So people familiar with the I-20 East corridor will have the same stops and order as the US 78 corridor. And that's really what we try to do across a lot of these corridors is simplify and streamline the routing for each route. So the 419 will stop at Snellville and then Hewitt Road before continuing into downtown and midtown. A couple of things to note for this corridor, the Stone Mountain Park and Ride will be closing, and then riders will need to switch over to the Hewitt Road Park and Ride, which is about 5 minutes up the road, or they can, of course, also go to the Snellville Park and Ride. 419 will provide service to both downtown and midtown Atlanta now. And then peak hour service will decrease from every 15 to 30 minutes to every 50 minutes. And so I'll go over that schedule, and I'll remind people, if you have questions about US 78, please drop them in the chat and we'll cover them at this time. And so the schedule here for the 419, again, the left side is going to be the AM service. The right side is going to be the PM service. So the Snellville Park and Ride will be the first stop on the route, and the first trip in the morning will start at 5:10 a.m. It will stop at the Hewitt Road Park and Ride around 5:20 before getting into downtown just shy of 6 a.m. and then into the Midtown area around 6 o'clock as well. And then the last trip of the morning will be starting at 7:40 at the Snellville Park and Ride and get into downtown around 8:45, midtown around 9. And then in the afternoons, the route will start in midtown around 2:30, pick up in downtown starting around 2:45, 3 p.m. And then the last trip of the day will start pickup in midtown at 5 p.m. and then start picking up in downtown around 5:30 before going out to the Hewitt Road and then Snellville Park and Rides around the 6:30, 6:45 timeframe. Similar to the I-20 East corridor, there will be 2 trips that will only operate Tuesday to Thursday, and the remaining trips will operate all days of the week. So the 6 a.m. morning trip and the 4:10 p.m. trip will only operate Tuesday to Thursdays, which means the 5:10, the 6:50, and the 7:40 a.m. trips will operate Mondays and Fridays and all days of the week. And then the 2:30 p.m., 3:20 p.m., and 5 o'clock trips will operate Monday to Friday.
Hunter, is that all in your presentation for US 78?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Please drop any specific questions related to US 78 in the chat. We will review them and publicly answer them. Again, please drop any questions related to US 78 in the chat. All right, I see 2 questions, Hunter. One, I don't know if it's totally related to US 78, but I'll ask it and we can clarify. They asked, I think this was for the previous one, will the pickup at Springfield Baptist Church reopen in the future? The park and ride seems to be well used and the area is growing.
Yeah, so that is a I-20 East question, and that's the East Conyers Park and Ride lot, which is currently a leased lot. And so that lot is slated to close. I would say we wouldn't rule anything out if, passenger demand increases in the future, we may reopen that lot. But as of right now, the East Conyers lot, which is the lot located at the Springfield Baptist Church, is slated to close on June 16th.
Okay. Next question. A viewer asks, so are Fulton County employees required to use the Ted Turner stop?
Yes, that is likely going to be the closest stop for Fulton County employees. So I would say, back slide here. So in the mornings, I'd recommend getting off around the Ted Turner Drive area, and then in the evenings, it'll be closer to the Forsyth Street at MLK intersection there.
Okay. Again, I don't know if this one is applicable, but we will ask it since they dropped it. Someone wants to know, why did you guys reduce time slot for 419? I heard not all drivers want to do 419 in the mornings and the afternoon because of 3 highway trips, I-20, 285, and 78. They always end up canceling and delaying 419 times. That's a lot. Are you able to process that one?
Yeah, I'll say that similar to a lot of the other corridors, the trip reductions were really driven by passenger demand and the budget mandate for fiscal year 25. I'll say that as part of the service changes, we did go back and reevaluate some of the on-time performance and adjust schedules as needed. And then also, take a second look at the operator requirement, the labor requirement for this to ensure that, particularly on routes with fewer trips, that will prioritize not missing those trips. As we know, that's been a historical issue on some routes.
Okay. There are no more questions related to 78 currently posted. I'll give you guys one more minute, and if not, we'll move on to the next, which will be 85. But any other questions related to US 78? Okay. Someone asks, 423, 426 related question. Would North Avenue train station continue to be an AM stop?
Yes. So the bus will stop through downtown. And then before going through a lot of Midtown, it will stop at the Civic Center and North Ave MARTA stations in the morning and the evening, actually.
Okay.
All right.
And we had one last question. 419 is normally a fairly crowded ride between 4 and 5 p.m. with many missed trips and full seats already. What will be the solve or solution if buses are full? So this is related to 419, 4 to 5 p.m.
Yeah, so I'll say that, when we were planning out the schedule, we really did look at existing ridership and to ensure that no bus or trip would be beyond capacity. And ATL actually has service standards to make sure that if there is a bus that is overcrowded and there are standees on at least more than 1 or 2 occasions per week, that they'll institute a tripper as resources allow. And really what a tripper is a second bus that comes in and picks up any additional passengers so that there's not standing passengers on the bus, particularly at highway speeds.
All right.
All right.
That concludes the questions for US 78.
Okay. So I'm going to move into 85 North, and I'll preface that this is broken into 3 different sections because there is a lot going on in the 85 North corridor. So I'm going to start first with the Emory, then talk about Midtown, and then talk about downtown service. So a new service for Xpress as part of the coordination with Ride Gwinnett will be the Route 415, which will provide direct service to the Children's Hospital as well as the Emory area from the Sugarloaf Mills and Indian Trail parking rides. So as you'll see here on the map, the new Route 415 for Express will provide service from the Ride Gwinnett and Express Sugarloaf Mills park and rides. and then stop at Indian Trail as well to pick up before going to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and then stopping in the Emory area. So on the right here, you'll see a little more detailed stop order for the route. And I'll say that if you're familiar with the Gwinnett Route 110, this is actually the same exact stop location and order that the Route 110 does today around the hospital and the Emory area. So primary service changes here for Ride Gwinnett is the Route 110 will be merged with Express service with the Route 415. And that will be the new route again that provides service to Choa and Emory. And buses will arrive roughly every 45 to 60 minutes in the AM and PM here. And so what that looks like from a schedule perspective is the first bus in the morning will leave the Sugarloaf Park and Ride, the Ride Gwinnett one, at 5:30. Also pick up at the Express Sugarloaf Park and Ride, and then pick up at the Indian Trail Park and Ride. And that would get you to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta around 6:15 and Emory around 6:30. And then the last trip in the morning would start around 8 a.m. at Sugarloaf Ride, Gwinnett Park and Ride, and then get you to the Healthcare of Atlanta around 8:45 and Emory around 9 a.m. And then in the PM, service would start at Emory and then around 3:15, pick up throughout the corridor in addition to the Healthcare of Atlanta before dropping off at Indian Trail and the Sugarloaf Mills Park and Ride lots. And so the first trip would start at 3:15 and the last trip would start at 6 p.m. So this is a little bit different of a schedule than Gwinnett's Route 110 operates today. However, the stop orders in terms of the hospital and Emory are going to be the exact same. And I'll move into Tiffany. I'm going to go through all of the 85 North and come back to you. So the next tier is the Midtown service. And so this will be for riders solely bound for the Midtown area. And we've got some new route numbers here, so definitely pay attention to the route that's going to work best for you. So starting off, the Route 412 and 414 will provide service in the 85 North corridor to the Art Center and Civic Center, MARTA stations, as well as a number of stops in Midtown. And that service will start in the Buford Park and Ride and at the Hamilton Mill Park and Rides. And then both routes will actually stop at the Sugarloaf Mills Park and Rides before going into Midtown. And similar to some of the other routes in the Midtown area, they'll service the Civic Center MARTA station and then continue up West Peachtree up to the Art Center MARTA station before going out of service in the morning. And in the evening, they would start pickup at Civic Center and end pickup at Art Center, making these 5 stops in between and then heading back out to the various park and rides. So some of the primary changes for this corridor are the Mall of Georgia Park and Ride, which is a leased lot for Express currently, will close. ATL recommends that riders from the Mall of Georgia use the Buford or Sugarloaf Mills Park and Rides for Express service. In addition, Express routes 410 and 417 with direct service to Perimeter Center and the Lindbergh MARTA station will be discontinued. And then Ride Gwinnett commuter bus service will be merging with Express service along 85 North. And so riders coming from Ride Gwinnett will want to, if they're bound for Midtown, will want to use Express routes 412 and 414. And then buses on this corridor will come every 60 minutes for Midtown. And so here you'll see a schedule view for each route. So if you're starting your trip at the Buford Park and Ride, you'll have 3 options in the morning and then 3 options in the evening to come back to the Buford Park and Ride. And then the same goes for the Hamilton Mill Park and Ride. You'll have 3 options starting at 5:40 through 7:40 in the morning, and then 3 options starting in the evening from 3:45 to 5:45. One thing I'll note here, and you may have picked it up, is that if you're using the Express or Gwinnett Sugarloaf Mills lots, you'll actually have double the amount of trips that are available for you to use to go to Midtown. So while there's 3 trips coming from the Buford Park and Ride and 3 from the Hamilton Mill, you actually have 6 trips you could use from the Sugarloaf Mills lot, both in the morning and the evening. So, something to think about if it's a trade-off between driving maybe a little bit further to the Sugarloaf Mills, if one of these trips works better for your schedule. And then finally, for downtown service, there's a couple of different options that will be offered in the 85 North corridor as well. So routes 411, 413, and 416 will be providing service to downtown from the Buford, Hamilton Mill, Sugarloaf Mills, and Decula Park and Rides, as well as Indian Trail. And so the routes will serve downtown and starting around Peachtree Street and then entering onto John Portman and Cortland, and finally ending along MLK, which again I'll mention is very similar to how they service the area today. And then in the PM, they'll start pickup on Forsyth, kind of meander through downtown before ending at Ted Turner. And one thing I'll note here is the Route 416 will actually serve Civic Center as well. So that's a little bit of a difference from the Decula route today. So again, the primary changes here is the Mall of Georgia lot will be closing. So we encourage riders to use the Buford or the Sugarloaf Mills lots. Routes 410 and 417 will be discontinued, along with direct service to Perimeter Center and Lindbergh MARTA stations. And then Ride Gwinnett will be merging with Xpress. So any Ride Gwinnett customers will want to switch over to Express service starting June 16th to one of these new routes available. And then lastly, on the 85 North corridor is the schedule for the downtown service. So there's a lot of options here. You can see, starting with the Route 411, you'll have 4 trips from the Buford Park and Ride. And then the 413 will have 3 trips from the Hamilton Mill Park and Ride. And then the same goes for the evening. And then the Route 416 will start at the Decula Park and Ride, also pick up at Indian Trail before going into the downtown area, from 5:30 through 7:30. Again, I'll note for riders that are bound for downtown, one option is if one of these trip times doesn't work for you at the Buford or Hamilton Mill, you would certainly look at the Sugarloaf Mills lots, as those will have more options due to like a truncated and combined service along both of those routes. So something to consider and weigh. If one of the route schedules doesn't work for you, it may be a good alternative to go to the Sugarloaf Mills lot instead.
Okay. All right, thank you, Hunter. Again, participants, you can drop specific questions related to I-85 North in the chats. They've already started. One of the questions is, what will the color of the zone be for Sugarloaf and Indian Trail?
Yeah, so I will hold off on that 1 second. I want to make sure I answer it correctly, but we do have a slide that will go through the fare zones for the 2 new park and rides, as well as the remaining park and rides that will be staying open.
Okay. Someone asked, any other park and ride option near Hamilton Mill or Buford Park? Sorry, it's jumbled up. Let me reread this one. Any other park and ride option near Hamilton Mill or Buford Park and Ride? I am not in walking distance. It's at least 2.5 miles. So I guess they want to know any other park and ride options near Hamilton Mill.
Yeah, so really Hamilton Mill is going to be the closest option up along as far north along the 85 North corridor as that is. The Buford lot is just a little further up from the Mall of Georgia lot today. I would encourage them. I'm not 100% familiar with some of the Ride Gwinnett services in the area, but I would suggest to see if they have a route that might connect to the Buford lot. That Buford Park and Ride is actually a lot that is currently served by Ride Gwinnett today. So that will be a new lot for Express service. But yeah.
Okay. One last question related to 85. Someone asks for 412 and 414. Basically, the last bus pickup in Midtown is around 5:45 p.m. with nothing later. So I guess they want to know, is there any pickups after 5:45 p.m. for 412 and 414?
Right. So yeah, that last trip in the evening for the 412, 414 for the Midtown area will start at 5:45 p.m. from the Civic Center MARTA station, and then continue up West Peachtree all the way to the Art Center MARTA station before ending at before going out of Midtown into the park and rides. So I would say that 5:45 to 5:57 window is going to be the last trip for the Midtown riders.
All right, that's it for I-85.
Okay. And I'm sure as we go through this, if there are additional questions, we can come back towards the end there. So moving on to the Georgia 400 corridor. So as of June 16th, the Route 401 will provide express service in this corridor from the Cumming Park and Ride, and that service will operate to the Dunwoody and Medical Center MARTA stations. From there, customers will need to use MARTA's red rail line to access Midtown and Downtown, which is similar to the Route 400 alignment today. So the route will start at the Cumming Park and Ride, stop at a pair of stops just outside of the Sandy Springs station there at Perimeter Center West and Mount Vernon Highway. And then it will go inside the Dunwoody and Medical Center MARTA stations. So the primary changes for this corridor here, the Route 400, which is the route that provides direct service to downtown Atlanta today, will be discontinued, and the Route 401 will remain in service to provide riders access to Perimeter Center, as well as a few MARTA stations in the area. Again, riders that are going to downtown or Midtown will want to transfer to MARTA at either the Dunwoody or Medical Center stations to continue their trip. And then, as you'll see on the schedule here, peak service bus service will operate hourly on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on Mondays and Fridays, the 6:30 a.m. trip and 4:30 p.m. trip will not operate. So in the morning, customers will be able to use the 5:30, 6:30, or 7:30. They get you to the Dunwoody and Medical Center MARTA station is around 6, 7, and 8 a.m. And in the evenings, the bus will pick up around 3:30, 4:30, and 5:30 before getting out to the Cumming Park and Ride around 4:30, 5:40, and so forth. So that's all I have for the Georgia 400 corridor.
Okay. At this time, we will take questions for related to the Georgia 400. Feel free to place them in the chat. So we have one question. A participant wants to know, does Express have a plan for riders that need to use MARTA to Dunwoody for Route 401 when there are train delays?
Yeah, that's a good question. So riders coming from downtown or midtown, certainly if there's a train delay, one thing I would encourage riders to do is register on the Georgia Commute Options website, and they actually provide a guaranteed ride home a few times a year if you're faced with train or bus delays. That way you're not stuck at a MARTA station wondering what to do if the train was delayed and the express bus has already left. So that would definitely be one option I would encourage riders to check out. Should there be a significant train delay that would, cause them to miss the express trip from the station.
Okay. Last call for Georgia 400 questions. We currently only have one in the chat. Please feel free to add your questions related to Georgia 400. All right, Hunter, there are currently no more questions in the chat related to GA 400, so you can proceed.
Okay. So moving on to 75 North, as many riders know today, there's a few express routes that serve this corridor. Starting June 16th, the Route 484 will be the sole route operating in the 75 North corridor, and that will provide service from the Hickory Grove and Town Center Park and Rides to the Midtown area, starting at the Civic Center MARTA station up to the Art Center MARTA station. So some of the primary service changes for this corridor, the Woodstock and Ackworth Park and Rides will be closing, and ATL encourages riders to use the Town Center and the Hickory Grove Park and Rides to continue accessing express service. The routes 480, 483, 485, and 490 and direct service to downtown Atlanta will be discontinued, with the Route 484 providing direct service to Midtown Atlanta. So similar to the 85 North corridor, in this corridor on 75 North, the CobLink commuter bus service rather, will merge with express service along this corridor. So customers that have been using CobLink routes, I believe 100, 101, and 102, will want to switch to express route 484 as of June 16th. And then buses will arrive every 30 minutes in this corridor. I'll note here, similar to some of the other Midtown service, the route will start dropping off in the morning at the Civic Center MARTA station before working its way up West Peachtree and ending at the Art Center station. And then in the afternoons, pickups will start at the Civic Center MARTA station and then end at the Art Center MARTA station before going out to Town Center and Hickory Grove Park and Rides. So the schedule for this corridor, as I mentioned earlier, buses will come every 30 minutes from the two park and rides. So starting at the Hickory Grove Park and Ride at 5:30 a.m. and picking up at Town Center shortly after will get you to Midtown around 6:15. And then in the last trip of the morning at 8 a.m., the pickup will be at Hickory Grove and then Town Center, and that will get you to Midtown closer to the 9 a.m. time frame. In the PM outbound service, the first trip will start from Civic Center at 3:15 and get you to Town Center around 4 o'clock. And then the last trip in the evening will start around 6:15 p.m. and get you to the end of the route by 7 p.m. So in coordination with Cobb County, we really wanted to maintain a similar level of service span that several of the CobLink commuter routes offer today, as well as many of the express routes today too. So, Tiffany, I'll hand it over to you if we have any questions on 75 North.
Got you. Yes, please place any questions related to 75 North using the Q&A button. And just for house rules and house cleaning. So when I say chat, the chat may be disabled, but the Q&A button allows you to drop your questions in. And also, we do need to get through the presentation. We'll have a Q&A at the end of this presentation where we will try our very best to answer a lot of your questions. We likely won't get to all of them tonight. However, they are being recorded, and we will follow up with answers to your questions via our FAQs, just to make sure we are addressing a lot of the issues or questions and concerns that relate to the adopted plan. Again, use your Q&A button to drop your questions in. We're currently taking questions related to I-75 North, so you can drop those using the Q&A button, sorry. All right, so I have one, Hunter. Someone asked, for the 75 North corridor, I currently take a Cobb Link bus and had purchased a package of 20 Cobb rides to be added to my Breeze card. Will using my Breeze card on the Express service utilize the rides I purchased from Cobb?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as of June 16th, any riders using Express, they will not be able to use CobLink Fare Media. So I would encourage anyone that's using a CobLink commuter pass right now to go ahead and make sure that you have Express fare media loaded on your Breeze card starting June 16th, as that is the only fare media that Express can accept on their buses. I'll note that we'll talk a little bit later about fare transfers, but we recommend using a cash value on your Breeze card to make sure that you can get the free transfer to and from MARTA. So for example, if you load $5 on your Breeze card to ride Express into town, you'll get the free transfer to MARTA after exiting the Express bus, and then vice versa in the evening using that cash value to enter into a MARTA station, exit through the fare gate, and then you'll have the free transfer as you tap onto the Express bus.
Okay. Thank you, Hunter. Next question. Someone wants to know, why does the 75 North corridor not have a separate downtown and midtown route or a combined route? That's question one. They have quite a few in one sentence, in one paragraph. So why does the 75 North corridor not have a separate downtown and midtown route or a combined route?
Yeah, so a lot of this was based on existing passenger demand and input from Cobb County and Cobb Link staff. And we really found that in this corridor, a majority of the riders were bound for the Midtown area. In addition to that, we really wanted to maintain what we heard back from riders, but they wanted to maintain a higher level of frequency on this corridor. So, the trade-off between maybe having hourly service to Midtown and hourly service to downtown versus having every 30-minute service to Midtown. And that was one thing we heard from passengers and Cobb Link staff during the public input period.
Okay. Another part of that, someone wanted to know, why are riders working downtown forced to transfer to MARTA at Civic Center to get to 5 Points area?
Yeah, so again, I think that goes back to, we were looking at the overall demand and looking at some of those trade-offs between having a more frequent service to Midtown versus splitting it out into Midtown and downtown. And that's really what we heard back from this corridor.
All right, well, that's all we have currently. Well, someone just dropped one. What happens to people going to City Hall, state and GSU students?
Yeah, so those would all be downtown destinations. So I would recommend anyone using the 75 North corridor today, starting June 16th, will use the Route 484 and would need to transfer to MARTA at the Civic Center station and continue their trip to either Peachtree Center, 5 Points, or the Georgia State MARTA stations to get a little closer to those destinations, because it's a pretty hefty walk from Civic Center.
Okay. All right, that's all we have for I-75.
Okay. So we have 3 more corridors, and then we'll go into more about the fare details and some alternative options. So for I-20 West, the Route 463 and 476 operate in this corridor today. Starting June 16th, this will be very similar to how they operate now. So the 476 will provide service from the Hiram and Powder Springs park and ride lots. And then the 463 will provide service from the West Douglas and Douglas NMTC. And they'll both be providing service to downtown and midtown, similar to what you saw on the 20 East and US 78 corridors. So the buses in the morning will drop off through downtown, similar to how they do today, and then continue up into midtown in the morning. And then in the evening, they'll pick up starting in midtown, loop back around, and then pick up in downtown before heading back out west. So there are very minimal routing changes to these 2 routes for I-20 West. And they'll continue to provide direct service to downtown and midtown. The primary change in this corridor is the peak service will be decreasing from every 20 to 30 minutes to every 60 minutes now. And so the schedule here for that, the 463, which will provide service from West Douglas, will start at 5:20 in the morning and also have a 6:20 and 7:20 trip. And then in the PM outbound, The bus will pick up in Midtown, starting in Midtown at 3, 4, and 5 p.m. and then pick up through downtown, pick up through downtown before going out to the park and rides. The 476 will be very similar. So it will start at the Hiram Park and Ride, pick up at the Powder Springs Park and Ride before serving downtown and Midtown. And then in the evenings, it will pick up in the Midtown area before going downtown, and then the park and rides out there. I'll note here for this corridor, we are looking at a reduced Monday and Friday schedule. So the 7:20 a.m. trip and the 5 p.m. trip will not operate on Mondays and Fridays, and for the Route 463. And then for 476, the 6:15 a.m. and the 5 p.m. trips will not operate on Mondays and Fridays.
Great.
And Tiffany, that's all I got for 20 West.
Got you. All right. Please drop your questions in the Q&A related to I-20 West. There is one question that kind of came in between. I don't know if it's for this route or the previous, but someone asked, is Big Shanty, the town center park and ride, stop closing?
It's a good question. No, it is not. The 75 North corridor, so the Woodstock and the Ackworth Park and Rides will be closing. However, the Hickory Grove and the Town Center Park and Rides, the Big Shanty / Town Center Park and Ride, will remain open and be served by the Route 484. Yep.
All right, so again, last call for questions to be dropped in the Q&A related to I-20 West. There is one. Someone asked regarding Route 476. I see that the Monday and Friday morning arrival times for downtown are at odd times of 5:59 and 8:18. The normal 8 a.m. business hour start time is completely skipped. We would have to arrive downtown 2 hours early or 18 minutes late.
Yeah.
Please elaborate.
Yeah, I'll say that the schedules that you see here were really based on a lot of passenger input that occurred back in January and February, and we wanted to balance that with the overall service span. So if the 476 is operating from say 5 to 8 a.m. today, we wanted to be able to spread those trips to make sure that we were still meeting kind of the same service span. And unfortunately, that ended up where, we have hourly service, so there will be some times that may not be met due to this service reduction.
Okay. Next question. Someone wants to know, they say they ride the 463. When is the last bus?
The 463, so the last bus in the morning will leave the park and rides out at West Douglas and the MMTC around 7:30. In the evening, the last bus will start on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The last bus will start at 5 p.m. at the Civic Center MARTA station and pick up through Midtown. However, it will pass through the Civic Center station again. So if 5 p.m. doesn't work for you, you may be able to catch it at that 5:31 time as the bus is picking up throughout downtown. And then Mondays and Fridays, when this 5 p.m. trip is not operating, you'll be able to catch the bus at the Civic Center stop either at 4 p.m. and it will go through Midtown, or you can catch it again at 4:31 and it will go through downtown before going to the park and rides.
Perfect. I think you just answered one of the other questions. It was still about 463. Someone wanted to know, will the 463 bus make 2 stops at the Civic Center in the PM? And I think you just addressed that. All right, we'll take one more and then we'll move on to the next corridor. Someone wants to know, will the stops along Thornton Road still be picked up?
Yes, the stops along Thornton Road will remain in service for pickup and drop off in the morning.
Okay. Well, before we leave, someone wanted to know, they asked the shade out routes, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that they're referring to this schedule here. So the bolded times that you see here on the schedule represent the times that the route will operate throughout the week. So Monday through Friday, the bus will pick up at the West Douglas Park and Ride at 5:20 a.m. and 6:20 a.m. However, on Tuesday to Thursday, the 7:20 trip will operate. So Mondays and Fridays, that 7:20 trip will not operate since Express will be running a reduced schedule on those 2 days. And really that's based on the passenger demand and the tendency for people to work remote, and we see less riders on Mondays and Fridays.
Okay. All right. Well, that concludes our Q&A for I-20 West.
All right. So the 85 South corridor, there are a couple significant changes here. So the Route 453, which serves the corridor today, will continue serving the Noonan Park and Ride. However, the Union City Park and Ride will be closing. So, and then the route will be truncating to MARTA or terminating at MARTA and no longer continuing into downtown and midtown. So, we've got a closer up map of what that looks like. So that riders, we know this is going to be a brand new MARTA station for a lot of people on the corridor. And so the 453 in the morning will use the highway basically all the way until the MARTA station and then drop off passengers along the street along Main Street and Lee Street, which is just outside the station there. And then this little blue line here is kind of the general walking path. So passengers would use the sidewalk that gets you out to the main entrance to the station where the fare gates are, and the escalator and elevators. And then you would cross over the railroad tracks to get to the station platform. So I would estimate it's about a 2 to 3 minute walk from this bus stop on the street and through the station up through the escalators and over to the station platform. And then from there, anyone that's using the train to get to downtown or midtown would be able to use the red or gold rail lines. And so right now, MARTA is operating peak service every 10 minutes on their rail line. So that means theoretically, customers should be able to catch the red or gold line every 5 minutes to downtown or midtown. And then in the evenings, they would come south towards the airport and get off at the Lakewood Fort McPherson MARTA station and then exit the platform and then, hang a left outside of the station and then go back out to the street side where the express bus will be picking up. So, and this is on the website. I encourage you to go online so you can see exactly where this route will be terminating. And so, but the overall primary service changes here is the Route 453 will be providing direct service to the Lakewood Fort McPherson MARTA station, which means ultimately direct service to downtown and midtown will be discontinued. The Union City Park and Ride will also close. Riders at that park and ride are encouraged to use the MARTA bus Route 189 to continue their trip. And then peak hour service will decrease to every 55 to 60 minutes. So the schedule for this route here, the 453, the first pickup is going to be at Noonan around 5 a.m. and end at the station around 5:40. And then the last pickup will be at 6:45, end at the station just before 8. And in the PM, it will pick up at the station at 3:30 through 5:30. And then the first trip, both in the morning and the afternoon, would not operate on the Mondays and Fridays due to reduced schedule.
All right. Any questions for I-85 South? Please drop in the Q&A. Use the Q&A button to place your questions. All right, so I do have one question. Someone asked, why is Route 453 not using the bus bays? A bigger inconvenience using a stop on the street with no shelter, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this station, what we ran into is there is a vertical height clearance for the bus bays at the Lakewood Fort McPherson MARTA station. and the express bus is actually taller than that vertical clearance allows. So one part there, and then the second part is really aimed at ensuring that the bus can get in and out of the highway as quick as possible to shorten passengers' ride time. So those are the two reasons we looked at picking up on the street side versus within the bus bay there in the MARTA station.
Okay. Next question. Why discontinue pickup and drop off downtown and midtown?
Yeah, so along this route, we've actually found a couple things. One thing was when we ran the travel time estimates, it was actually quicker for riders to transfer at the Lakewood MARTA station and continue their trip to downtown and midtown. And that's really due to a buildup of congestion once you get north of Georgia 166, which is the Langford Parkway exit. And that's where the Fort McPherson MARTA station is. So that was the primary reason is we found that it actually saves passengers travel time by using MARTA rather than having the bus sit in traffic. The other piece of that was looking at the overall demand from this corridor and attempting to increase the productivity. We found that this was a corridor that was identified for truncation to MARTA just based on a lower ridership than many of the other corridors in the express system.
Okay. Last call for questions related to I-85 South. All right, we just got one in, and this will be the last question. Someone asked, they said the 6:46 a.m. bus does not allow persons to reach work for 8 a.m. Why this time?
Yeah, these times were selected based on the existing schedule and making sure we kept that same service span or roughly similar. And so really if you're wanting to get earlier, while you may be just a little past 8 a.m. to get to downtown from the Lakewood MARTA station, if you're wanting to get earlier than that, you would need to use that 6 or 5:50 a.m. trip that gets you to the station at 6:36. So again, a lot of these schedules, we presented them back in mid-January to the public, both in virtual and in person, and then made several adjustments based on that feedback that we received about when people wanted to get to work, when people were leaving work and going home.
All right. Okay, that concludes the Q&A for 85 South. We're moving on to 75.
All right. So the final corridor we're going to walk through tonight is the 75 South corridor. And there's several changes that will be going on in this corridor. So starting June 16th, the corridor will be served by routes 430 and 441 at the Jonesboro, Stockbridge, and McDonough park and rides. And they'll continue to provide service in downtown and midtown. And you'll see here the map on the right, the exact same map as the 20 East and US 78 and 20 West corridors. So the bus will begin drop off in downtown in the morning before going through and then dropping off in midtown afterwards. And in the evening, the bus will pick up in midtown and then go south and pick up in downtown before ending at one of the park and rides along 75 South. So some of the primary service changes on this corridor, the route 431, 432, 440, and 442 will be discontinued, which I think, Tiffany, we had a question earlier about maybe it was the 431 or 432, but both of those routes will be discontinued. And then the 430 and 441 will provide service to downtown and midtown. So what that means is the Hampton and Riverdale park and rides will close, and ATL encourages riders to use the Jonesboro park and ride lot as an alternative for those. And then also the BrandsMart lot, overflow lot will close starting June 16th, which anyone using that lot, we recommend using the Stockbridge park and ride lot to access Xpress, which will be just over the highway. It's about a 2-3 minute drive across the interchange there. For this corridor, the 430 will have 4 trips. So for anyone that might recall back in January when we first presented this, we only had 3 trips on the 430. So this is one area we added another trip based on demand and input from passengers and riders back in January. So the 4:30 we'll have 4 trips. The first one starting at the McDonough Park and Ride at 5 a.m. And then the last trip in the morning will start at 7:30. The first trip will get you into downtown around 5:50 and Midtown around 6. And then the last trip will get you to downtown just shy of 8:30 and Midtown closer to 8:45. In the evening, if you're coming from or if you're going to the McDonough and Stockbridge lots, the first trip will start pickup in Midtown at 3 p.m. and then get to downtown to start picking up around 3:35, 3:40. And then the last trip in the evening will start pickup in Midtown at 5:30 and pick up in downtown around 6:15. Then the 441 will have 3 trips. The first will start at the Jonesboro Park and Ride at 5:20, get you to downtown around 5:45 and Midtown at 6. The last trip will start at 7:20 and get you to downtown around 8 o'clock and Midtown around 8:15. And then finally in the evening outbound for riders at the Jonesboro Park and Ride, pickup will start in Midtown at 3 and then end around 5. And then in downtown, pickup will start around 3:30 and end around 5:45 or so. Again, I'll note on this corridor, there's a couple trips that are not bolded and have that asterisk there that will not operate on Mondays and Fridays due to a reduced schedule. So on the 4:30, the 5 a.m. and the 5:30 p.m. trips will not operate on Mondays and Fridays. And then the 4:41, the 5:20 a.m. and the 5 p.m. will not operate on Mondays and Fridays.
All right. Please drop any questions related to I-75 in the chat. I noticed we already had a few that have populated. First question, someone wants to know, why are there 6 schedules for I-75 North? It jumped off, sorry. Again, why are there 6 schedules for I-75 North, but only 3 for the South? What is the difference between the people who are living in the South who have to commute through 3 hours per day?
Yeah. So I think we had a similar question back in January for this. And really what it boils down to is, as part of this overall service plan, ATL really wanted to commit to offering at least 3 trips in the morning and 3 trips in the evening for each corridor, both to ensure passengers had some options based on when they needed to get to and from work, but also to ensure some reliability. What's different about the 75 North corridor is Cobb County, as part of their discontinuation of CobbLink commuter buses, has increased their support for express service in the 75 North corridor. And with that combined funding support from Cobb County, Express is able to operate more trips on 75 North. And the same goes for 85 North too. So on that corridor, with the discontinuation of Ride Gwinnett services, Gwinnett County actually came to ATL and is providing additional funding for enhanced service on that corridor. So that's why you see there's a little bit of difference between 85 North and 75 North, is those 2 counties have offered increased funding for enhanced service. And I'll mention, and I don't know, Kane, if you want to jump in at all, but I would say ATL is always looking for other jurisdictional partners should they want to increase service along corridors within the Express system.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter, for that. I would agree with what Hunter said. We are open always to additional partnerships with folks who, local governments primarily, but other folks who might be interested in helping us support additional trips.
Yep.
All right, next question related to I-75 South. Will the 4:30 stop at 5 points in the mornings? I don't understand this one, but how will the fare difference be handled since there involves 2 different zones?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part of that. So I think it was the Route 430 you said, Tiffany.
Yes.
We'll stop pretty close to the 5 Points area. So you'll see here the Peachtree Street at 5 Point Station. And I'm not sure if it was in the mornings, I think. So it'll stop just after I'm looking at the schedule just after 5:50 is the first trip and just after 8:25. So anyone that's going to the 5 Point station from the 4:30, you'll want to look at this fourth time point, and the bus will get there shortly after what's noted on the schedule there. And I think there was a second part to that question.
Just how will the fare difference be handled since there involves two different zones?
Right. So the fares will be different based on where the rider is boarding each park and ride, similar to today. And just shortly after this, we'll walk through the different park and rides and their fare zones.
Okay. One last question related to 75 South. Someone asked, with Hampton and Rockdale closing, ridership will increase on the 440. Will extra buses be added to accommodate the increased number of passengers?
Yeah, so right now this will be the service that's implemented starting June 16th. As I mentioned earlier, ATL will continually monitor ridership, and should there be, a dramatic increase in ridership and available funding to support additional service, then that is something that the ATL would look at as a future service implementation date.
Perfect. Okay, so this will conclude our Q&A with corridor-specific questions. We'll go ahead and proceed with the rest of our presentation.
Okay. And then I'll mention, of course, after we get through this, we have the remaining time to answer any other Q&As there. Real quick, because I know we got a lot of questions on the downtown and midtown routing during the January-February timeframe. So I know we've gone through all the specific routing by corridor, but just as an overview, I wanted to walk through some of this. So this is a general downtown and midtown map. So downtown Atlanta is going to be closer to the bottom. Midtown Atlanta is going to be up by the top there. And you'll note that the I-20 East, I-20 West, 75 South, and US 78 corridors will all have the exact same routing. And then the 85 North corridor, as we covered earlier, will have a separate downtown routing noted in the dark blue here. And then the midtown routing noted in the light blue. And then the 75 North routing, which would be this lime green, light green color there. So just wanted to quickly touch on that. This map is available online, and the interactive map I think is really helpful to be able to go through each route that you might use and see where those stops are at. So I know we had quite a few questions on fare policy and MARTA transfers, both in the current Q&A session today and back in the winter when we were doing some of the public input sessions. So overall, the new service plan does not include fare changes for express park and rides that will remain open. So customers may continue using cash, exact change one way only, or Breeze cards, both the physical and mobile, to access Express. So in addition, the new service plan also includes Express service at a few new park and rides. And I think this was a question earlier tonight, but the Buford Park and Ride, which is going to be new to the Express system, will be in the blue zone. And then the Indian Trail Park and Ride will be in the green zone. And so below you'll see the exact pricing structure with the green zone starting at $3 one way, $5 round trip, the blue zone, a $4 one way, $7 round trip. I'll emphasize again that these fares are remaining the same for the time being for Express service. And then on the map here on the right, you'll see more of a kind of spatial view of the fare throughout the system. So Tiffany, I'm not sure which parking ride we got asked earlier. I think it was the Indian Trail one. But that one will be in the green zone, and then the other new one will be Buford, which will be in the blue zone. And then the remaining park and rides will be staying in the zone that they are in today. So for instance, if you're at the Hickory Grove park and ride lot, you're going to continue to use the blue zone. And if you're coming from CobLink, if you previously used a CobLink commuter bus, you'll want to take note of the fare zones for Express. So Hickory Grove and Town Center will be the blue zones. And then same if you're coming from the 85 North Corridor and used to use the Gwinnett commuter bus service, you'll note that a majority of those parking rides will fall in the blue zone, and the Indian Trail lot, a little closer in, will be in the green zone there. So very similar to how the fares operate today. Now, I wanted to talk a little more about fare transfers, since we will have some corridors that are transferring to MARTA. Customers, I'll reiterate that there's no changes in fares, and customers may continue to use cash value or their Breeze mobile or physical cards. But regarding MARTA transfers, customers along Georgia 400, which will be the Route 401, and 85 South, which will be the Route 453, will be required to transfer to and from the MARTA station to continue their trip into downtown and midtown Atlanta. So again, we really encourage customers to use a stored cash value to be able to take advantage of that free transfer. So the way it works is a customer will tap on the express bus. So you're getting on at the Stockbridge lot in the morning. You'll tap onto the express bus, and then you'll get a 3-hour transfer valid to use on MARTA. So you'll be able to get off at 5 points and enter the fare gates with that free transfer. Then in the evenings, if you're coming from the Lindbergh area, you'll get on at Lindbergh, go through the fare gates, make sure you tap your card to get out of the MARTA station, and then that will enable a free transfer to the express bus. So I'll reiterate again, a Breeze card with stored cash value must be used to redeem this free transfer. And so customers using a monthly pass, such as an employer provided pass, will need a Breeze card with stored cash value to transfer to MARTA. So otherwise, in the mornings, if you're using an Express monthly pass and you're transferring to MARTA, you'll get the free transfer on the way in because you tapped on Express first and then you tapped into MARTA. But in the evenings, you'll be required to pay that cash value through MARTA before tapping onto Express. All right, and then kind of the last section here is really summarizing some of the resources that are out there for customers that may be impacted by some of these changes. And so we'll walk through a few of those. The first one I've already mentioned a couple of times tonight, but Georgia Commute Options, Vanpool, and MARTA are all great jurisdictional partners and offer services that impacted customers may be able to use to continue to support their commute. So Georgia Commute Options, or GCO, is a program that allows users to find commute options for their trips. So within the app, which can be accessed at georgiacommuteoptions.com, users can match with carpool groups and then log their commutes to earn rewards. And really what a carpool group is, say you have a coworker or someone that works at a nearby block. If y'all are both making a very similar trip, then maybe you want to combine that trip so that only one person is driving a couple of days a week, or you save gas and whatnot. The second option here is Vanpool, which is similar to carpool, in that you're commuting with a group of riders that may be coming to or going to a similar destination and time. And so what differentiates the Vanpool from a carpool is that this service provides a vehicle for a group to share. So users can prevent wear and tear on their own vehicle, their own private vehicle. And also another pro of this is the ATL provides a subsidy that covers 40% of the cost for these Vanpools. And if you want to learn more information about the Vanpool program, you can either visit the Redefining the Ride website with the QR code down below here, or you can go to expressga.com/Vanpool. And then finally here for MARTA, of course, MARTA is available particularly for routes 401 and 453 for customers that would transfer to continue their trip. And then I'll reiterate that as long as you're using that cash value, you'll have 3 hours to transfer for free to and from MARTA. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about a little more tonight is an incentive program that Georgia Commute Options is offering for current riders and riders that may be impacted and need to switch to a carpool or van pool program. So in anticipation of these changes, GCO is offering change support for riders who will be continuing to use Xpress or seeking an alternative to Xpress, such as carpooling or van pooling. So those potential carpools can be found via the Georgia Commute Options website, which also again provides those carpooling rewards as well. And then the region is also home to dozens of van pools operated by Commute with Enterprise, which I'll have a video that goes through that here afterwards. That includes that 40% subsidy from ATL. And these van pools offer a fixed schedule and route, similar to an express bus, but with fewer riders and more of the ability to match schedules and routes to rider needs. So it's more of a on-demand option rather than following to the adhered fixed route schedule for Express. So with this, Georgia Commute Options is offering a couple of things for additional support. So all riders who continue to ride Express or new riders that begin riding Express will be able to claim a $50 gift card that they can use towards MARTA transfers or Express fare. Alternatively, those who shift to carpooling or van pooling can also receive a $50 gift card. Plus, if you're a driver of one of those carpool or van pools, you can also receive an additional $50. And so all riders are encouraged to visit the Express Change support page via the QR code that's down here at the bottom of your screen right now. So center bottom there, you can scan that QR code and go online and check out some of the incentives that Georgia Commute Options is offering. And also some more information on any support materials if you're severely or significantly impacted by these Express changes. So next I'm going to play just a quick 2.5 minute video on Vanpool for those that are interested in learning more about it. Definitely go to Georgia Commute Options or the ATL website, and I'll go ahead and run that now.
You and your colleagues live in a variety of places around your workplace. If you live nearby, you may choose to walk, take the bus, or even ride a bike. But if you live further away, you'll likely depend on your personal vehicle and incur additional costs on fuel, wear and tear, and more. We work with thousands of employers across the country to identify common commuter areas. Then, we create convenient vanpool routes so commuters can share a reliable, flexible ride to work. We provide each crew with a recent model SUV or van, minimizing the costs and environmental impact of using a personal vehicle. Commuters can save on fuel, wear and tear, and maintenance costs, reduce carbon emissions, and enjoy additional flex time when they're not behind the wheel. Let's look at an example to see how it works. Randy is using the Commute with Enterprise mobile app to tell us that he commutes to work Monday through Friday. Nina lives nearby and tells us she commutes on Mondays and Wednesdays. Sarah also lives in the area and commutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We set Randy, Nina, and Sarah, and 7 others, up with a 10-person vehicle. Riders have volunteered during enrollment to take turns driving. They meet at a scheduled time and place and share a ride to work using one of our recent model vans. This Monday and Wednesday, Randy is driving, and Nina and 5 others ride to work with him. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Randy, Sarah, and 7 of their coworkers ride to work together. Every day, they can view their upcoming riding and driving schedule, and if their schedule changes, they can change it month to month. As interest continues to grow, we'll add more and more routes. While we take care of details like maintenance, vehicle liability insurance, and roadside assistance, you can take control of your commute online or by using our mobile app. Manage your schedules, meetup spots, driving preference, payments, and even meet your crew. How will Commute with Enterprise transform your commute to work?
All right. And I'll mention you can find more information on the ATL website and the Redefining the Ride website as well. And again, ATL does cover 40% of the subsidy for this program. So I highly encourage those that if the Express service is no longer working for you, to definitely look into this and take advantage of that. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Kane to talk a little bit more about implementation and then our Q&A.
Thanks, Hunter. So just real quickly to give you an idea of where we've been and where we've gone, we've mentioned before that we've had a fair amount of public engagement already. We opened a public comment period January 13th of this year, and closed it on February 12th. We had two public meetings during that time frame, one similar to this online, one held in person. We've been before our board numerous times to brief them on the work that we've been able to do on the project. All of those meetings are broadcast live on the web. And then finally, we came to our board in April of this year and presented the final plan and asked them to instruct us to begin implementation, which they did. And so between then and now, we've been working hard to get all of this information together for riders to help folks understand what the changes will be. And we plan to implement these changes on June 16th. As I mentioned before, we are making these changes for essentially two reasons. One of which is that we have found that we're offering more service than is being consumed. While we were going through this analysis, that was what was borne out. And our budget has been cut by $4 million in the state legislature. And so those are the motivating factors for where the service is heading on June 16th. The other thing that I would say is that this doesn't obviously mean that this is how the service will be forever. We are cognizant of changes in work from home and all of those kinds of things. And so we will continue to monitor the service as time goes on and attempt to make changes to the service as we are able to, given our budget constraints. Unless we receive additional funding, either through more partnerships like we've reached with Cobb County and Gwinnett County, or additional revenue is added back to our budget in the legislative process, we will likely be at these service levels for the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean that we won't be able to tweak trip times or make other small changes as time goes on, but we are facing real budgetary constraints, and that is how you see us get to these service levels that we're offering.
Okay. All right, thank you, Kane. We will now merge into our question and answer session. First of all, I would like to thank all of the active participants who provided corridor-specific questions. That is a part of our Q&A. So we definitely want to thank you for diving in and participating and asking your specific questions there. At this time, it is 7:45 p.m. We will take the rest of this time to answer your questions here. And again, if we don't get to all of your questions tonight, these will be reviewed after the webinar. And within the next few days, we hope to have just an overall encompassing the top questions added to our frequently asked questions on the Xpress website. So if we don't get to your question tonight, I'm sure if it's something that multiple people are asking or very specific, it will be added to our Q&A. I'll hop right into the first question for the sake of time. Someone wanted to know, how was public input used to adjust the final system plan?
So I could take that. So as Kane mentioned, we had public input through January and February. And really what that helped inform us of was not only when people are coming to and from work, but also, some corridors that might need additional service. And so some of the changes since the public input period back in January were modified schedules. So we did adjust several of the corridors to better meet the input that we heard at that time. And then if you're really looking closely, you'll note that the I-20 East, US 78, and 75 South corridors all had an additional trip added back into their schedule. And that was really based on concerns from riders about overcrowding and being able to get to and from work at a reasonable time. So those were some significant changes that were added since the public input session. And then the other piece of that is, the addition of Cobb and Gwinnett support for their respective corridors. And that really made an impact to the 75 North and 85 North schedules that will be implemented on June 16th.
Okay. Next question. What are my options if my route has been discontinued or if the park and ride I used is closed?
Yeah, so I would say first, if your park and ride is closing, definitely look at the alternative park and rides. And, if you have access to a personal vehicle to be able to reach a neighboring park and ride, in most of the corridors, the nearest park and ride that's remaining open is about 5 to 7 minutes away. If that doesn't work for you, then I would definitely encourage you to check out Georgia Commute Options and the Vanpool Commute with Enterprise options, as those provide additional ways that people can get to and from work.
Perfect. Next question. How are services planned to be merged between Xpress and Ride Gwinnett and Cobb Link?
Yeah, so 85 North will be merged with 85 North will be merged with Ride Gwinnett service and Express. So what that means is the Ride Gwinnett commuter buses will no longer be servicing those park and rides. So you'll want to look for the big giant gray Express bus and start boarding those come June 16th. And the same goes for the 75 North corridor. You'll no longer be boarding a Cobb Link commuter bus. You'll be boarding a big giant gray Express commuter bus instead. And then I would just reiterate, make sure you have the appropriate fare type for Express buses, as Express does not currently accept Cobb Link or Ride Gwinnett fare media.
Okay. Next question. Why do some return trips start so early?
So I would say some of that is likely based on the existing schedules. And ATL really went through and looked at the existing service span for each route. And we knew we didn't want to the best of our ability, cause someone not to be able to get to and from work. And so some of those trips had to start earlier, particularly on routes that we had to merge the midtown and downtown routing. So to continue providing service to those areas, some of those trip times had to start a little earlier.
I just want to be clear about the Cobb service and the Gwinnett service, that those folks are ceasing the delivery of Express service and instead are contributing resources to the ATL Express system to expand what we would have been able to offer otherwise. So all of the service will be the ATL service, not the Cobb and Gwinnett services, which will cease to exist. Both Cobb and Gwinnett have gone through their own public engagement processes as required to be able to eliminate those services and then contribute some resources to ATL to pick up some of that service.
Thank you. Next question. This is a frequently asked question. I've seen it multiple times in the Q&A. Someone wanted to know, or multiple people wanted to know, if ridership has recently increased due to return to office mandates, do you still need to make these changes?
Yeah, Kane, you want to take that? I think
The,
that's similar to what you said earlier.
the answer is unequivocally yes, because of the budget constraints that we've talked about several times. We do not have enough money to continue operating the same levels of service that we were operating before. If we are able to find partnerships with local governments who would like to contribute some resources to help us increase service levels, we would be more than glad to interact with those local governments and sort of think through how that might work. Or if in future state budgeting cycles, additional revenues are added back to the budget, we might be able to offer some additional service. But as it stands right now, our budget prevents us from offering more service than we've shared with you tonight.
Next question, how will these changes impact bus reliability and punctuality?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I mentioned this earlier, but as part of the new schedule development, we did go through and look at the current on-time performance and the runtime, which is another way of saying how long is it taking the bus to get from the park and ride to a stop right now, and what's the difference in the schedule like today. So one thing we did was we went back and looked at the existing travel times and some of the on-time performance to ensure that the new schedules are, ideally increasing the bus reliability and punctuality, so that, the schedules that are published are the schedules that you see out on the street.
Tiffany, can I just jump in real quick because someone has been repeatedly been asking about the motor speedway on the south side. I just want to be clear that there are no plans to expand service currently. There are no plans to reinstate park and ride lots that we've talked about eliminating tonight because of our budgetary constraints. So again, I just want to make sure that that's understood and maybe just be very specific to answer that that participant's question, because it seemed like I wasn't being clear about that.
Perfect. Yeah. And I was actually going to ask that one. So Kane just answered your specific question again. It was basically, are there any plans to open Atlanta Speedway? And he has answered you directly. All right. Next question. After June 16th, what is the best way to provide bus service feedback for potential changes? Will there be a rider survey?
That's a good question. I'll say that, the ATO and Express have a customer service center that riders can offer suggestions on the proposed times and how Express could modify their trips to better serve their commute. So I would encourage passengers to express their feedback that way. Express actually just wrapped up a customer satisfaction survey late last year that reviewed a lot of the feedback from riders, and that also ultimately informed some of the recommendations that you see today.
Okay. Thank you, Hunter. We have a few more minutes. We'll take a few more questions. It is 7:54. For the sake of time, again, we are collecting all of your questions. And as I mentioned, as we've done with all of the other webinars, virtual public meetings, we do review the questions and we get back to you guys via our FAQ section, the frequently asked questions section on the Xpress Redefining the Ride website. So we will try to answer frequently asked questions there. Someone asks, with the decrease in inbound and outbound routes, will more of the older buses with more seating capacity be utilized as opposed to the newer handicapped accessible buses?
I would say that we have some of the older buses are past their useful life, so they are rotating out of the fleet. And we will have two bus types that will be offering service going forward. No bus will be older than 2019 as we are continue to sort of reduce the size of the fleet to be consistent with the amount of service that needs to be offered and to rotate those buses who are outside of the useful life out of our fleet.
Perfect. All right, here's another question. Someone asks, will the reverse commute buses in Gwinnett be eliminated?
Yes, so I believe they're referring to the Route 103A, which operates from the Midtown downtown area out to Gwinnett. And so as part of their public input process, as Kane mentioned earlier, they were taking that earlier in the spring, and they are continuing with their discontinuation of commuter bus routes. So yes, the Route 103A, which provides reverse commute out to Gwinnett County, will be discontinued starting June 16th.
Okay. We'll take two more questions. We are exactly at 7:56 p.m. and we want to be cognizant of your time. The next question that I have in queue, someone asked, were ridership numbers tallied before or after federal workers had to return to the office downtown? If so, will there be a retally?
Yeah, so we've been continually monitoring ridership, and we know that with the federal return to office, particularly around the March timeframe, we've been monitoring ridership to make sure that none of the proposed and final service plan trips that are going in are going to cause those overcrowding issues. So yes, we've been continually monitoring ridership through, I would say, as of the last few weeks now.
Yeah, thank you, Hunter. We will of course continue to monitor ridership. This is part of our ongoing practice, and so we we want to be able to optimize the service, the amount of service that we're able to provide, and optimize it such that it as best it can meets the demands. And so we will continue to monitor ridership and then adjust as we can to make changes as needed.
Okay. One last question, and I do have one, I'll make it two because one just kind of wraps up everything about the webinar. But this one, a participant wanted to know, will there still be guaranteed ride home available? We previously had buses that never showed up. What if the last bus is canceled? So again, the question is, will there still be a guaranteed ride home program?
Yes, so the Guaranteed Ride Home program is something that's offered through, I believe, the Georgia Commute Option. So you'll definitely want to register that so you can take advantage of that, whether it's from a missing bus or maybe you had something occur at work and you had to stay later past the last express bus that night. There's still that Guaranteed Ride Home program that's available for riders.
Okay. All right, and this one was in queue, which will be our last and final question. A participant wanted to know again, when will the new service plan go into effect?
Yep. So as Kane mentioned earlier, the new service plan will go into effect June 16th, which is Monday. And then, leading up to that, ATL staff and representatives will be at all of the park and rides actually the week before, handing out flyers for the corridors so that customers will have a copy of the final schedule and routing alignments. And I would encourage people to continue to, use the QR code on the screen and visit the website to make sure that you have a game plan starting Monday, June 16th, for the new service.
I would also just to tack onto that real quickly. We've talked a little bit about the Cobb and Gwinnett riders. We would encourage them to go ahead and use their passes up prior to the switchover, and then if there is need to bridge the gap between the time that the pass runs out and the time that we transfer services, suggest maybe just using cash value in order to take those trips that you need there.
Well, it is exactly 8 p.m. on the dot. We want to thank you guys for joining our virtual public meeting. This webinar was a success. I think we have a lot of participation in the chat, and we would again do our best to follow up with the frequently asked questions, having those updated on our website. We thank you for being valued Xpress customers. So that pretty much concludes, or it does conclude, our webinar. We are here to continue to put out information before the June 16th implementation. So make sure to stay connected via social media, via the Xpress website for updates. And also, I want to encourage you to register for the Xpress newsletter. There you will find our Transit Talk edition, which is bi-monthly. We will put out information there that is helpful along with our email blast. So that concludes our presentation. We thank you for joining us and have a wonderful evening.